Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining the JEPCO Symposium. And this is our first session of the day. And then if you were on the other channel, a few minutes ago, we just had the opening of the symposium with our two co-hosts, the representative of SHARM and of the IOC. And of course, you will have already heard a presentation from the Executive Secretary of IOC about the decade. So that's great, because that means I don't need to give you too much details about the decade. Hopefully, this is something that you are well aware about. So this session is really about discussing and hearing different perspectives in terms of how the decade can really promote international collaboration in the field of ocean mapping. But not only ocean mapping, it's really also about delivering knowledge and information to a whole suite of ocean stakeholders and users that require this information to sustainably develop and protect the ocean. So the decade, as you know, is started a few days ago now. And of course, we have an implementation plan, which was approved by the UN General Assembly on the 31st of December. And within that, and I invite you to consult this document, you will hear and understand the whole strategy that the decade offers as a high-level framework for really developing transformative action. Ocean mapping is I think is a core element of this decade. It really, as Vladimir mentioned in the previous session, is at the heart of many of our actions we are trying to promote, whether it's in relation to better understanding, mapping, and protecting critical marine habitats, in terms of modeling the impacts of tsunamis on coastal areas, in terms of better understanding ocean circulation and its interaction with the climate and the atmosphere. So, and of course, the decade also would like to promote the concept of a digital and integrated representation of the ocean. And of course, at the heart of this is bathymetry, but not only bathymetry. And there are many other layers of information we need to build and expand the scope globally, so that we can really develop this vision and this tool that can really respond to the need of many end users. So to discuss these issues with us, we have we have 5 great speakers with us, who each of us represent a bit of a different constituency and representation. And they are going to tell us a little bit how they see this decade unfolding, and how their community, or what are the specific needs that they would like to be addressed in the context of these 10 years ahead of us to develop this work. So our first speaker today is Dr. Larry Meyer. Larry is of course well known to the JEPCO community. He's the director of the Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping at the University of New Hampshire, and he's also the chair of the U.S. National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Medicine Ocean Studies Board, and he's also the chair of the U.S. National Committee for the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So Larry is going to give us his perspective of what the decade offers in terms of collaboration and transformative solutions for ocean mapping. Larry, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Julian. Let's see if my screen is being shared. I get no indication if that's the case. Yes, okay, that's very good. And you can hear me okay too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I couldn't have asked for a better introduction than Julian and Vladimir's presentations, because I think as we all know here, several years ago, the JEPCO community embarked on the Nippon Foundation JEPCO Seabed 2030 project, which is this aspirational effort to see the entire world seafloor map by 2030. And as has been mentioned several times, just 11 days ago, the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development began. It began 11 days ago, but clearly, as Vladimir described, there's been a lot of effort that has gone into it before. And what I've been asked to do is look at how these two efforts can interact with each other. And hopefully I'll demonstrate that the Decade and Seabed 2030 are remarkably complementary, and that the Decade provides an unprecedented opportunity to help meet the goals of Seabed 2030, and in doing so, enhance international cooperation, advance technology, and build capacity in ocean mapping. And I think, again, this has been set up beautifully by both Vladimir and Julian. I think everybody here really in the JEPCO community knows about the Nippon Foundation JEPCO Seabed 2030 project. There'll be an entire session on it on Wednesday. But for those few who may not know, let me just say that Seabed 2030 is a collaborative project between the Nippon Foundation and JEPCO to facilitate and inspire the complete mapping of the world ocean by 2030, and to provide a freely available authoritative map of ocean bathymetry through JEPCO. The motivation for the effort is to empower the world to make policy decisions, use the ocean sustainably, and undertake scientific research that's informed by a detailed understanding of the global ocean floor for all the reasons that we've heard about. And if we look at the overarching goals of the decade, and if you listen to what Vladimir has just told us, the overarching goal of the decade to provide transformative ocean science solutions for sustainable development, connecting people in our ocean, the idea being to create the ocean we need for the future we want. And you can see that that is just totally consistent with the objectives of Seabed 2030. And so there really is no contrast between the two. They're really very much one and the same. Vladimir and Julian both mentioned the decade implementation plan, and it describes three very high-level objectives: generating the necessary data, information, and knowledge needed to generate a comprehensive understanding of the ocean, and then increasing the use of that knowledge and understanding. And these are certainly compatible, completely compatible with the idea of complete mapping of the seafloor. The implementation plan then presents 7 outcomes, and Vladimir discussed these outcomes that describe the ocean we want, with outcome 4 being a predicted ocean. And if we look at the more detailed description of that, we see that it also clearly implies the complete mapping of the ocean. The implementation plan that Vladimir went into also describes 10 challenges that we need to overcome to get from the objectives to the outcomes. And if we look at challenge 8, as has been discussed already, develop a comprehensive digital representation of the ocean, we see that the idea of complete mapping the oceans is clearly articulated. And while these words are very general about mapping all parameters of the ocean, let me borrow an approach I learned from my lawyer friends to try to better understand what the intent of those words were. And when lawyers look at a treaty or a document or a law and try to understand what was the intention, they go back to what they call the travaux préparatoires, the preliminary work that led up to that document. And if we look at some of the earlier decade presentations, we see that in identifying research priority areas, mapping the entire ocean floor and processes was clearly stated. And if we look at some of the earlier texts, we see clear statements about mapping the world ocean and understanding the critical importance of a complete seafloor map for many applications. And so you can see that the concepts of Seabed 2030 are really in the DNA of the decade, which is truly wonderful, because what we have before us with Seabed 2030 is really a large and formidable task. We've taken a look at what the magnitude of this task might be, and we've made some attempts to estimate what that effort would be. And if we look at just the deeper part of the ocean, 200 meters and deeper, we've estimated that, depending on you have calculated many different ways to calculate it, it would take somewhere between 70,000 and 127,000 ship days at a cost of something between $3 and $5 billion. And we might say that's just an impossible figure, but I also point out, as I discuss this often, that that kind of cost is the cost of a single mapping mission to Mars. And we've had many of those. And while I love the idea that we've gone off and mapped Mars, I think we can think about putting at least one of those efforts towards mapping our own planet. But just as the decade is encouraging the development of new technology, Seabed 2030 is also looking at technological innovation to help reduce the cost of the effort. And we're most excited about the role of autonomous vehicles in terms of the role they can play in increasing the efficiency and lowering the cost of data collection. And I'm particularly excited about the launch last week of a new 22-meter long sail drone, the sail drone Surveyor, which has a deep water mapping system, a full suite of mapping systems, including a deep water mapping system. It has a very green footprint and the potential to stay out for many months at a time. And you'll hear more about this from Brian Connon tomorrow. There's also the role that crowdsourcing can play as an important source of data, but also as a means of engaging a much broader community and building capacity globally. So we're very excited about the role that technology can play in seabed 2030. And this is also an integral component of the decade. So again, they're fully compatible. And while this technology will inevitably help, I don't believe that we'll be able to complete the goals of seabed 2030 without international collaboration. We need to encourage national programs, and we've already seen some great examples of that with the Irish National Seabed Survey, the newly started US National Ocean Mapping, Exploration, and Characterization Strategy, we call NOMEC, which calls for complete mapping of the US EEZ, and the Australian National Mapping Program. But beyond national programs, we need to encourage regional programs, and we have seen some good progress there too. The Atlantic Seabed Mapping International Working Group, with the most ridiculous acronym I've ever heard, ASMWG, if you can say that. That came out of the Galway Statement and is a great example of Canada, the US, and the EU joining together to try to fill the mapping gaps beyond national jurisdiction in the Atlantic. We also have seen recently some very wonderful coordination of efforts between the IOC's Subcommission for Caribbean and Adjacent Regions and the Mesoamerican and Caribbean Hydrographic Commission in seabed 2030, where it was agreed that the IOCARIBA and MAC would propose to completely map their region by 2030. So we're seeing great progress on that front, but we need more regions to do the same. And if I put my idealistic academics hat on, I wonder if we can also have a coordinated global effort for seafloor mapping. And before the decade, I would have said that that was impossible. But I think the decade may offer the incentives and the potential mechanisms to see such an effort evolve. It also offers tremendous opportunities for more structured sharing of technology and capacity building, and perhaps even a forum to address issues of the constraints of bathymetric data collection with respect to crowdsource bathymetry and the general question of the collection of bathymetric data for a freely available global product and the marine scientific research regime. And so it's my sincere hope that the global interest in the decade, the collaboration that'll come from it, and most importantly, the recognition of just how important ocean mapping data are to meeting the goals of the decade will bring us to a new era of open and shared data collection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Larry, for sharing your vision of how the decade can really support this ocean mapping efforts, of course, through the alignment with seabed 2030, through national investments, regional cooperation. And in that respect, I wanted to also highlight that as part of a preparation phase of the decade, we've really worked at the ocean basin scale. And I think there are a number of regions where we are really seeing a good alignment and motivation from stakeholders in working at that level. One example we have is the Western Tropical Atlantic Task Force for the decade, which is now also actively trying to move forward a number of decade actions, because of course we also have a call for action that at program level that was issued in October, and of course there will be several other calls. But this is one way also for the community, I believe, to engage, and we have similar groups working in the Arctic, in the Mediterranean region, and so on. And finally, on the point related to organizing and having really a strong global forum, I think this is something that we would really like to encourage. I mean, that is to have a self-organizing group of stakeholders, and we will have a global stakeholder forum put in place for the decade. And I think it would be excellent if we could have one stream of that forum focusing on the ocean mapping and the application of ocean mapping to support sustainable development. So with this, we will now go to our next speakers. And by the way, let me just highlight that hopefully if we manage to get through all the speakers in a timely manner, we should also have a little bit of time at the end for taking a few Q&As and hopefully respond to your comments. So it's a great pleasure to invite our next speaker, and this is His Excellency Michael Lodge, who is the Secretary General of the International Seabed Authority. Michael has been re-elected as SG of ISA in November, and of course we congratulate him for this. Michael has more than 30 years of experience as a public international lawyer, and of course has extensive knowledge of the UN and other intergovernmental bodies. His significant achievements include his pivotal role in the ISA from its inception in 1996, and of course in helping to create and implement the first international regulatory regime for seabed mining. So with this, Michael, the floor over to you on the issue of interest vis-a-vis the ISA and the mapping of the area.
Well, thank you very much, Julian, and thank you everybody for joining into this call. It's a great pleasure to be here. I hope everybody can see the presentation on the screen. I can't see myself, so I hope that, well, it doesn't matter if people can see me or not, but I hope you can hear me and you can see my presentation.
We can, we can see.
Great. And I think I listened with great interest, as always, to Larry's presentation, which was excellent. And I think my presentation actually follows on really well from the general comments made by Larry. And I think in response to him, I will start actually with my conclusion from this presentation, which is that I completely agree with Larry that international cooperation is necessary. I think it is possible. I think there are good platforms out there to enable international cooperation, and I'll talk about some of those, primarily, of course, the decade itself. But I think that we have to also recognize that at the end of the day, there are some practical constraints, particularly when you start to drill down into the contributions of particular individual sectors. And I'll be discussing some of those today. I don't think that those constraints are insuperable at all, but I think that we certainly need to think carefully about how we can overcome them. So to begin, for those of you who are not aware, let me just give a little bit of background to the mandate of the International Seabed Authority. Primarily, our function is to manage exploration and exploitation for deep sea minerals in the international seabed area. That is the seabed beyond national jurisdiction, beyond the EEZ and the continental shelf, with associated mandates to promote and encourage marine scientific research, as well as, of course, to protect the marine environment and biodiversity. The next slide will just show a general depiction of the jurisdiction of ISA. It's the area, as I said, beyond the continental shelves, which are marked in red on this diagram. So it's that sort of orange area. It's a very, very large area.
Michael, sorry to interrupt you. Apparently your slides are in notes mode. If you could put them in display mode, as I believe some of our viewers are having difficulties seeing them.
Somebody else is controlling my slides, actually, so let's just see if we can do that. I should say I'm joined on the call by some of my technical colleagues who will be able to answer some questions later if we have time for that.
It should be the little E.
Okay, I think he's going to start the share again. So let's see. You can't show full screen.
It still appears in this notes.
Okay, he'll keep working on it while I keep talking. If we can go on to slide number 4. So I just wanted to build on the last slide by talking about the extent of activity that is taking place in the international area at the moment as far as mineral exploration is concerned. ISA has awarded 31 contracts for exploration now. This slide is perhaps not the best because it shows the 31 contractors, but it doesn't show where they are active. But effectively, we have mineral exploration projects taking place in approximately 1.5 million square kilometers of seafloor, primarily the Clarion-Clipperton Zone in the Pacific Ocean, the Western Pacific, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and the Indian Ocean Triple Junction area. So very large area of seafloor that is under exploration. Exploration primarily consisting of survey work, which evidently includes very fine scale bathymetry, which obviously brings us to the subject of this discussion. Of course, it also includes other things such as biological surveys, environmental surveys, and so on. And I believe the slides are working properly now. Thank you very much, colleagues. So as far as ISA's contribution to mapping is concerned, if we go to the next slide, we can discuss briefly the strategic framework. In fact, we're mandated by the UN General Assembly in its resolution on the law of the sea to which encouraged ISA to continue to work towards the standardization of bathymetric information collected in the area in cooperation with IOC, UNESCO, and IHO, particularly obviously under Seabed 2030 project. And this is very much an elaboration of an agreement of cooperation that we signed with IHO during the 22nd session of ISA 2016. Following that agreement, the cooperation with IHO was embedded into ISA's strategic plan for the next 5 years and its associated high-level action plan, as well as the action plan for marine scientific research in support of the Decade of Ocean Science, which we have recently adopted and was developed in very close cooperation, of course, with Julian and Vladimir and colleagues at UNESCO. So, what is the practical approach? Well, as I mentioned, we have 31 contracts involving 22 different entities, 20 different sponsoring states. So there is quite a multiplicity of parties to be involved. The concept of cooperation with the Seabed 2030 project was raised in discussions with ISA contractors. And I must say, I agree with Larry, there is a general willingness, a general interest in cooperation. So we can certainly say that international cooperation is possible. However, data is collected in many different ways. So there is certainly a range of different responses that we can envisage. Contractors are different types of entities. Some contractors are governments, some contractors are private entities sponsored by governments, some entities, some contractors are state enterprises. Some contractors are very willing to share vessel-based data. Some need authorizations from their respective governments. Some require time-based embargoes on the release of data. Some require technical clarification on the different types of data that should be released and so on. The point is, of course, that all contractors are collecting vast amounts of data because mineral exploration necessarily requires the collection of very fine scale bathymetric data. And all those data have to be supplied under various conditions of confidentiality to ISA, where they are maintained in our deep data database. But it's clear that more guidance is needed as to how data can be shared effectively amongst projects like Seabed 2030. There is an argument, for example, that actually the scale of data that you require for mineral exploration is much finer than the scale of data that would be required for GEBCO. So do we need to provide everything, or is some sort of less fine scale data set sufficient? And there are various questions about the format and type of data. So we've been looking at how we can best advance this project. We had discussions since March last year with IHO about how we could best advance an incremental approach. For example, by beginning a pilot project with 1 or 2 contractors in the first instance who would be willing to share bathymetric data with the least number of restrictions on the release of those data. We've identified a number of the technical issues that need to be addressed with IHO, and we're looking at, for example, a communications protocol between ISA as the manager and the owner of the data, the contractors, and the Seabed 2030 project. We're looking at ways in which that pilot project could then be replicated amongst all other contractors so that it becomes a standard protocol that can be applied by ISA to its contractors. So we hope, we hope that we'll be able to prepare a report on this pilot exercise and present it to ISA stakeholders, in particular contractors, in the first instance, and then subsequently through the political organs of ISA, including the council, to have that endorsed. So in essence, I think where we are is that we certainly have that interest, that willingness, that recognition of the value and importance of the Seabed 2030 project, the interest to share data, the recognition that there are platforms available, including the Decade, including the cooperative arrangement between ISA and IHO that we can use and that we can build on, but a number of primarily technical obstacles that will need to be overcome to develop a satisfactory data sharing protocol so that in due course we can make this a standard provision, a standard requirement for all ISA contractors to provide data at the scale that is useful for GEBCO, that does not adversely impact upon confidentiality requirements of contractors, does not impact their ability to collect data that is relevant to mineral resource prediction, and to advance the project as much as possible. So with that, as I said, I have technical colleagues online as well. If there are technical questions afterwards, we'll be very happy to respond to those. So thank you very much, and apologies for the problems with the slides at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Michael, and no worries. I think it worked well in the end. And of course, thank you also for presenting the ISA approach, which I think aligns very well with the Decade objectives in terms of really enhancing the infrastructure, the common approaches that can really enable interoperable data sharing and stewardship, and of course how we can really enhance collaboration between data providers and end users. So without further ado, we'll now move to our next third speaker, and this is a pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Sturla Henriksen, who's a special advisor with the UN Global Compact. So Stroller has been in the past CEO of a Norwegian ship owner association for about 10 years until 2017. And he has also 10 years of experience from cross-industry strategic management consulting, including working for the EU Commission services and several Norwegian national administration organizations. So Stroller is going to focus on the interest of the private sector in terms of ocean mapping. Stroller, the floor is over to you.
Thank you very much, Julian. Thanks for the invitation to speak here, and a very happy new year and a happy new anniversary indeed to everyone. Congratulations to the organizers for the 100th anniversary of the GEPCO project. Let me also commend you for hosting this very important and interesting conference. As always, it's a challenge to speak after Michael and his always eloquent, interesting and knowledgeable presentations. And in addition, today I have no fancy slides like he has to show, so I shall entirely have to rely on the spoken words. Now, I think this conference is a fitting kickoff for the decade of ocean science and also of the decade of deliveries on the sustainable development goals. And the two are intrinsically interlinked in our quest for the future that we want, as laid out in the 17 sustainable development goals. We need the ocean more than ever to combat climate change and environmental degradation, and to ensure better lives for a rapidly growing world population. We need to produce more food from the ocean. We need to harness renewable ocean energy. We need to decarbonize the vessels that are carrying 80% of the world trade of goods. And we need also to tap from the ocean's vast potential for medicines and minerals. Also, we need better governance of the ocean. We need better systems for integrated ocean management, and I also believe that we need more elaborate and extended concepts for marine spatial planning. And to succeed with this, we need, literally speaking, more in-depth knowledge about the ocean. We need more knowledge about the blue abyss, about the seafloor, the water column, and the marine life in this vast biosphere. We need more ocean science, and we need to collect, share, disseminate, and apply bathymetric and other ocean data to serve the needs in all strands of ocean activities. And that calls for collaboration across national, regulatory, scientific, and industrial boundaries. And last but not least, between the public and private sector, which fits, of course, directly into one of the 17 SDGs. In fact, SDG number 17, which is calling for partnership for the goals. And I truly believe that the private industry can and will take an important role in this work. And this is not a proposition based on altruism and goodwill. Rather, I believe it's in the genuine self-interest of the business community to do so. Because the ocean industries, they are set to expand rapidly in the years ahead. And the OECD is forecasting that the aggregate growth of ocean economic activities will outperform growth in the global GDP. And this means that more companies will need to know more about the ocean. There will be an increasing demand for ocean data going forward. And this increasing demand for ocean data is also matched by an increase in the massive capacity of the ocean industrial actors to collect and share and apply data, knowledge, and insights on the ocean. Consider, for instance, like Larry alluded to, the 70,000 plus vessels in the global merchant fleet that at any given time are crisscrossing the deep seas from coast to coast and from continent to continent. All of them are collecting operational data on the seafloor, surface, and water column related to depths, currents, waves, salinity, and temperatures. Consider the hundreds of thousands of trawlers and fishing boats chasing tracing and mapping coastal and pelagic fish stocks. Consider the pharmaceutical companies collecting samples of marine plants and species to develop medicines and healthcare products. Consider also the tens of thousands of fish farms, offshore rigs and support vessels collecting and sharing detailed operational data about the seabed and water columns in the fjords and on the continental shelves. One example, in my previous position as CEO of the Norwegian Shipowners Association, I had the pleasure of accompanying one of our members to the UN General Assembly week in 2017, where this company, PSG, one of the largest seismic survey companies in the world, had a collection of data, 16 years of data collected on different continental shelves all over the world, which was handed over to the UN. Also, imagine the potential for accumulating, analyzing, and using these data by private sector development and deployment of big data, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and machine learning. And these kind of actors can all be potential contributors to the decade of ocean science. And this is also one of the key priorities for the UN Global Compact Action Platform for Sustainable Ocean Business. UNGC is the UN's private sector arm. It's chaired by the UN Secretary General and has a membership of 10,000 plus companies and 4,000 civil society organizations. That makes it the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. An important part of the UNGC's activities are organized around some 10 action platforms, of which the Ocean Action Platform is one. And participation in this platform is by invitation only, composed of the world leading ocean-related companies, prominent ocean research institutions, the most relevant UN specialized agencies, including, proudly, our good friends in the UNESCO IOC and ISA, where Vladimir and Michael, respectively, with their dedicated colleagues, have done an outstanding job. And also the World Bank is participating, and the project is supported by the governments of Norway and Portugal. And the Ocean Action Platform is working on a number of major topics, and you can find an overview in our Ocean Stewardship Report 2030. And in this, we are identifying 5 tipping points, of which data collection and improved knowledge of the ocean is one. Moreover, we have developed a set of sustainable ocean principles, of which 2 out of the 9 are addressing data sharing and transparency. We have signed an MOU between UN Global Compact and UNESCO IOC, whereby we undertake to encourage collection and sharing of data from the private sector. So in conclusion, in the private sector, there's a rapidly growing demand for ocean data, an increasing capacity to collect and share such data, and a growing will to do so. And on behalf of the UN Global Compact Ocean Action Platform, I can assure you of our dedication and commitment to do this work. So good luck with your further important work, and we look forward to the cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sturla, and of course we very much look forward to the excellent collaboration we have with the UN Global Compact in the context of a decade to really help liberate this ocean data so that this can really become common goods and really support the needs of governments, of citizens, and of course of businesses themselves, because they are both users, contributors and users of this information for their operation at sea. So this is something that is really a cross-cutting element within the decade, and we look forward to work with you and other partners in providing a more systematic platform for the exchange of data on those topics. So with this, we're now going to our 4th speaker, and this is a pleasure to invite Mr. Sean Cullen from a Geological Survey of Ireland. So Sean is now the co-manager of the Irish Informer Seabed Mapping Program. He has been with the Geological Survey of Ireland since they embarked on this huge continuous survey of the EZ and beyond. And of course, he's also a member of the IHO EU Network Working Group and the Irish chair of the Hydrographic Society. And Sean is going to talk about ocean mapping products to support particularly management needs and marine spatial planning aspects. So Sean, over to you.
Thank you, Julian, and good day to everybody. Happy New Year. I just got to get my screen sharing going here. Let's show this one. Right, I've got quite a few slides here. I was asked to speak about ocean management and spatial planning purposes, the applications of ocean mapping. So to kick off, I'll just give a few overviews of what we do in Ireland with the Infomar program, which started with the Irish National Seabed Survey back in 1999. So now we've been going for just around 21 years. And this Real Map of Ireland is one of our sort of flagship products, if you like. It just shows the extent of the survey. And this slide then shows you kind of, on a Google Earth sort of platform, the footprint that we've made in the Atlantic with our multi-beam survey. We started from a fairly low base. This is a UKHO chart of where the lead line surveys were around Ireland, which had been the case right up until the Second World War when some more single beam was done. But now we are sort of, this is the NOAA viewer, where you can see that the Irish contribution to multi-beam in the Atlantic, the North Atlantic, has quite a sizable contribution there. So Infomar, basically, I'm just going to run through these slides very quickly because I'm not going to go through all the intricacies of it. But I think the big takeaway from this is that all of our data is free and open to anybody that wants to download it. And it's at full resolution as well. That allows anybody to develop products themselves along with the products that we produce. So that there's three main program areas, which is obviously the data acquisition, but then managing the data and trying to integrate it in and make it available to all the other stakeholders is a major part of the overall project. And then the value added exploitation is something that we haven't been brilliant at, but are really starting to make better gains in that now, and disseminating the knowledge that we've learned over the last 20 years. So why bother mapping? I think one of the main things that it does enable discovery, and we know for sure that the seabed topography influences the ocean movement, and if we are going to move towards a digital ocean and a digital Earth, that we need to know exactly what is happening with these ocean movements. Otherwise, it just becomes a window into something we're guessing at. Without the actual reality being depicted in a digital ocean, there's not really that much use to it. The Met Office in the UK has done a paper on the fact that high resolution bathymetry can model both the Met and the oceanography to a much better level, that the models actually start producing realistic predictions. And just one thing I want to pick up on this slide is that in doing the actual mapping of the ocean, we often run into a problem whereby some people just go out and have a look at the seabed, whereas we are trying to do it to a much sort of a more standardized approach. And this is something that's really important, especially if you start looking at backscatter and that sort of data for value-added products, then the really important thing here is that we try and get all our research colleagues to also embrace the standards set by the IHO and others. So another real important aspect of mapping the seabed is that it fits into both international but also national plans. And I think that's been a really great success in Ireland, as we have the Harnessing Our Ocean Wealth, which is the national plan, and there are specific actions, and Infomar provides the one major action is Action 23, which is to actually map the seabed. And all of this goes towards an integrated approach to healthy ecosystems and harnessing the economy that's available in the ocean. We were also one of the few countries in the world to do a cost-benefit analysis back in 2008. Since then, there's been these three: the US, the Cameroons, the Philippines, and one or two others. And I think we might be able to talk about this in the panel later, but I think this could be one of the biggest contributors to Seabed 2030 is if we could enable countries to do a cost-benefit analysis, which allow them to seek the funding to do seabed mapping, is really something that could be key to the whole program. As you can see here, there's a lot of value in the ocean. At present in Ireland, we're only at 0.8% of the GDP. Globally, it's 2%, and that's what we are aiming at as well. And I'm aware of time, so I'm just going to run through these. These are just basically, these slides will be available afterwards. So there are lists of where we're at now and where we're going. But one of the big takeaways from this slide is the collaboration and the outreach, using our data to work with others, especially in the EU through EMODnet, and then through the IHO, etc., through JEBCO and Seabed 2030. So I'll run through that quickly. And then another EMODnet program that we did was EMODnet Coastal, which was a spin-off of EMODnet Bathymetry. And one of the things we looked at there was the economic drivers and how freely available the data was. And obviously it's either freely available, as is the case with Infomar, but obviously there's other issues around national security and military requirements that can make it a problem for sharing. So the main sort of products of the seabed mapping, especially around the coast, would be for marine safety and charting. And as I said earlier, we really need to underpin it with the hydrographic standards as a minimum. And then, having that data, then we can start looking at the marine spatial planning, offshore renewable energy, habitat mapping, and obviously the geological resource estimations. All along trying to integrate that with other projects and build on the research. A big game changer for us was the UKHO brought out the VORF model for the vertical offshore reference frame. And this is, again, as with the standards, is a great leveler in terms of making all the data homogeneous. And then obviously, being a geological survey, we were very focused on the backscatter from the multibeam. And this really requires standard operating procedures. And again, we often get data in from research cruises where people are playing with the gains, changing frequencies, not steering straight lines. And at the end of the day, the backscatter is not really great. But we really rely on the backscatter to make useful products such as seabed classification, which is then ground truthed and useful for habitat mapping and resource management. As I said earlier, the discovery is a big part of the the Infomar program or seabed mapping. And back in the Irish National Seabed Survey, we call it, we found a lot of offshore coral mounds, and these were actually in clusters and provinces of mounds, and that has been a huge target for researchers. And it's only by doing these regional areas that you can start looking at specific areas to focus your research on. And a lot of these discoveries were actually coming from the backscatter as opposed to the bathymetry data. So there's many ways to access our data. There are a lot of viewers online, and we started with a few Interreg projects which looked at ways of disseminating data, and a lot of that's being absorbed now into the EMODnet here in Europe, and that's been an ongoing project for a good few years now, and we continue to expand the data that's available through EMODnet.
Sean, we're going to need to wrap up.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm actually just going to run through this very quickly then, just to get ahead. You go through the shipwrecks here and the fact that we now have an MSc module online, which is a useful module for people studying remote sensing. And the one thing I just want to touch on here is quality mapping is the next big thing for us, where we can graphically show quality of data and whether it's useful or not for different applications such as marine spatial planning. And just finally then, this is a new script that we've just put together, which actually draws on already available tools, but it shows the sub-bottom data with the bathymetry and the backscatter, and we can run all the data through in scripts, and it puts out these JPEGs, which are then basically a graphical metadata that people can interrogate through our viewers. I'm sorry I took so long there. So yeah, that's me done.
Great, thank you very much, Sean, and thank you for showing us some very inspiring examples on how really we can integrate bathymetric data with other types of data to deliver kind of new products that can really inform ocean management generally. This is certainly something that the Decade is trying to do to have this integration, so that we come up with this more holistic knowledge about the ocean system as a whole. Okay, so last but not least, I would like to invite my colleague Lucy Scott, who's the project coordinator with the IOC UNESCO Ocean Info Hub project. She has spent over 10 years working with African large marine ecosystem projects, and of course has also worked on a wide range of fisheries and mapping projects throughout Africa, including the African Coastal and Marine Atlas project and the International Coastal Atlas Network. So as part of a Decade, one of our objectives, of course, is to level the playing field in terms of capacities for ocean science. And of course, as part of that, ocean mapping is an important element. So let's hear from Lucy on the key messages and priorities we have for Africa. Lucy, over to you, please.
Thank you, Julian. My presentation should be being shared. Is that right?
Good.
Great. Thank you very much. So I couldn't claim to represent the African priorities overall, but I would like to present some contributions and perspectives from some African projects. It's obviously a very short time I have available, and within 8 short minutes, I'd like to just cover 3 main topics. These are the activities of the IOC Subcommission for Africa and the Island States, Africa and the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and the new Ocean Info Hub project. So with regards to the first topic, my colleague Miko Odido is on the meeting as well, and the symposium as well. He leads the IOC Subcommission for Africa and Adjacent Island States and contributed material to this presentation. The subcommission was officially launched in 2012 It's one of the 3 subcommissions of IOC, the other 2 being Westpac and IOCaribe already mentioned. The map just shows the distribution of the subcommissions, and I'll be moving through these slides fairly quickly. I'll be brief and to the point, and I welcome any questions or requests for more information by email, so I won't be going through all of the text. The IOC of UNESCO, of course, has a long history of supporting ocean science and capacity development. And in Africa, particularly, the full history is far too detailed to cover in 1 or 2 slides. But the 2 notable and relevant projects supported by IOC in Africa include the Oden Africa project, the 4 phases of the Ocean Data and Information Network for Africa project, which supported 40 institutions from 25 African countries in developing national oceanographic data centers for data and information management. I'm sure these are quite familiar to many of the participants here today. And then secondly, the African Coastal and Marine Atlas project, which was conducted in cooperation with the International Coastal Atlas Network, other UN agencies such as UNEP, and African Large Marine Ecosystem projects. So briefly on the African Marine and Coastal Atlas projects, 17 participating national oceanographic data centers are shown here on this map, as well as international partners, which were several of the African LMEs shown on the right in this diagram. The African Marine and Coastal Atlas project aimed to source, collect and format marine geospatial data sets and to make them available to marine scientists and managers. So some of the products that were developed include downloadable GIS products, a digital GIS atlas, and the 2 primary objectives were to improve access to data and to improve capacity to use data. The scope of the atlas covered numerous themes in the categories of geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, biosphere, and the human environment. And the Atlas project commenced in 2005, and it's currently in the process of being upgraded to a new platform and to have the regional networks revitalized. And Mika is working with the team of NODCs on that. So the Atlas incorporated data sets relevant in any way to coastal or marine sciences or management. And within the Continental Atlas, a number of national Atlas products were also developed. For example, the Atlas for Namibia has been used for marine spatial planning in Namibia. So it's been used as a tool by government departments there. The IOC Africa Current Work Programme covers ocean observations and monitoring, ocean sciences and assessment, ocean data and information management, capacity development for marine science and technology, and governance, science, policy interface, and awareness. With regards to Africa and the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the IOC Subcommission facilitated a consultation for Africa in January of this year, and mapping was identified as a key activity in at least 3 of the working groups. Key issues were identified for different outcome areas of the decade, and these are listed on the following 2 slides under the decade headings. It's notable to mention that IOC Africa and Seabed 2030 have discussed cooperation, and a webinar series is planned on seafloor mapping in Africa. Topics are still under discussion, I must say, are not yet finalized, but may include taking stock of ongoing mapping initiatives, identifying gaps that need to be addressed, and looking at available tools and capacity requirements. Then the third topic I'd like to cover briefly is the IOC Ocean Info Hub project. This is a new global initiative to improve access to marine and coastal data and information. It's a 3-year project. It commenced in April of last year and is funded by the Government of Flanders. And the intention of this project is not to develop a new or centralized system, but to develop interoperability between existing information systems and thus improve the flow of information to end users. So the intention for the project is to anchor a network of hubs. So building on the work of the IODE project office for the IOC and partners, the Ocean Info Hub will develop a proof of concept for underlying ocean data and information system architecture to enable this interoperability with local, regional, and thematic infrastructures. And finally, the intention is to connect contributors and users with the resources that they need to support their efforts. So the Ocean Info Hub project first is working with global IOC associated online resources, including Ocean Expert, Ocean Docs and Aquadocs, the Ocean Best Practices System, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, the World Ocean Database, Ocean Data Portal, as well as other European and global partners, including Eurocian, marinetraining.eu, EMODNet, which Sean just mentioned, and other sources in the IOC ODIS catalogue of sources. The initial data types that the Ocean Info Hub is going to be working with to develop these interoperability layers are people and institutions, documents, spatial data and maps, training opportunities, and vessels with respect to research opportunities on vessels. The project is also global in nature, but it's working in 3 pilot regions. So these are the African region, and of course here there's a very close connection to the IOC subcommission that I just mentioned, as well as building on the work of ODIN Africa over the past decades. And other 2 pilot regions are Latin America and the Caribbean region, and the Pacific Small Island Developing States. So these 3 regions all participated in the development of the proposal and will take a lead on pilot projects to test interoperability between existing hubs in these regions and the global hub. So this intends to enable users to more easily discover what they need, as well as to make resources in these regions more visible, and to allow regions to learn from each other, from success stories and from successful information hubs that they have already established. And then finally, the Ocean Info Hub development and implementation is fully based on co-design. The project intends to facilitate better access to global databases, but as I mentioned, also better visibility of national and regional data holdings, to assist countries in their reporting requirements, and to support the IOC capacity development strategy, which of course is very strongly linked to the decade goals for capacity development. The project focuses on the transfer of local knowledge, supporting early career scientists, and on remedying gender disparity. So in conclusion, some opportunities to partner with IOC Africa and the Ocean Info Hub project. Capacity development obviously is needed on an ongoing basis to increase skills and capacity in ocean mapping and to meet the growing needs of data analysis and visualization, to strengthen data collection capacities through the deployment of innovative technologies, to build on national data centers and the institutions that are supported by the IOC networks to act as central repositories for the archiving of source data at national level within countries, and ideally provide resources for data discoverability and access, and then to develop ocean mapping applications that support sustainable blue economy development, marine spatial planning, and sustainable development goals. Marine spatial planning, of course, being quite an important focus of some of the countries in Africa, and the mapping resources and data supporting those have been identified also as a key priority within the decade consultation process. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Lucy, for identifying some entry points really where the decade needs to focus, both in terms of capacity development, but also in terms of building on existing mechanism and infrastructure building efforts to really ensure that nations in Africa also can contribute to the objectives of JEPCO, seabed 2030, but it can also benefit in terms of developing information and products to support the management of national waters. So with these colleagues, we are 5 minutes past the hour, so I'm sorry for being a little bit late, but with a bit of a indulgence from your side, I would still like to maybe open the floor for a couple of questions to our panel. We can maybe go for another 5 minutes if this is okay with all of you. I am just looking at the Q&A and I can see that we have 3 or 4 questions there. So let's try to go quickly around those, and then we can wrap up. The next session will only start in about 1 hour from now. So we have a bit of margin here. So the first question I see appearing on the screen here is from Martin S. And it says, does the panel think there will ever be a need to remap certain priority parts of the oceans before finishing the whole global seabed, especially as the level of detail capture possible increases further? I'm thinking maybe could Larry try to answer that question? Would you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, and I guess there are two aspects to that. There are those places where we think that the original data just is not of high enough quality or high enough resolution, and certainly there, I think there'd be an effort to remap. But I think the other question is one of areas that are quite dynamic in terms of their changing. And this is a quandary I think every hydrographic agency faces, a global mapping effort too. I guess my druthers would say I'd rather kind of focus on getting a base map at some instant of time, but that instant of time is of course over a number of years, and then worrying about changes. So I'd rather see as complete a map as possible before I worried about change. But again, in those areas where there are critical dynamic changes, I could envision programs of repeat mapping, certainly.
Great, thank you. So next question is for Michael Lodge from the ISA. Can you clarify if ISA and its members are only exploring the possible contributions or are formally committing to contribute all or partial bathymetric data and other hydrospatial data to global initiatives such as Seabed 2030 and the decade? And if so, when will it start, and when first data sets will be sent to JEPCO for assessment and integration? So a pretty concrete and nitty-gritty question here. I don't know if you're able to provide this an answer, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian, and thanks for the question. And I mean, as far as the detailed technical issues are concerned, we're happy to respond to some of those offline as well, because I don't think there's time to go into them. But look, as I mentioned in the presentation, I think in principle, the decision is already made that the ISA contractors are willing and interested to cooperate with the Seabed 2030 project. The issue is that, as always, the devil is in the detail, and the question is how best to ensure that that can happen so that the greatest amount of data can be provided. And that's where we need to work on this pilot project, starting with 1 or 2 contractors, which we hope we can do this year. Iron out those technical problems, agree on consistent standards and consistent protocols for reporting, and then roll that out to all the other contractors. So I think that's really, in the short time available, the best I can say. But certainly my technical colleagues will be very happy to talk to Dennis direct on those questions of which bathymetry precisely. But in principle, no, international cooperation is, everybody is supportive.
Great, thank you very much. Just a question from Thierry Schmidt from Sean, addressing to Sean. Are you then asking programs such as the Decade and JEPCO Seabed 2030 to further promote best practices?
I think the answer is yes. It's the higher the resolution, the better the data, the more standards that are observed, the better integration with different data sets. So I would definitely promote the idea of a minimum of the IHO standards.
Okay. Great, thank you. Then going to a question from Shintani, the JEPCO chair. And it might be difficult to answer that question, but we can have maybe a quick tour. My question is, what do you feel about the resolution of a Seabed 2030 products over grid size, which is 100 meters for the shallower areas? What grid size is most required in your community? I don't know if anyone has a view on this.
Well,
Yes, Sean?
in coastal areas, we try and get our grid size to around 2 meters. So the data is available to make grid sizes of 30, 40 centimeters, which you do over REX, etc. But 100 meters is, to me, is too low for even modeling, hydrodynamic flows, etc. So I think, yeah, you want it as good as you can get it.
Great, thank you for that. Any other inputs on this?
Yeah, if I could just chime in, seabed 2030 kind of put out a list of not optimal, but does, at the end of the day, to assure that we can achieve the resolution of variable resolutions that started with 100 by 100 at 0 to 1500 meter depth range, and then went to 200 to 200 by 200 at 1500 to 3000, 400 by 400 to 5750, and 800 by 800 up to 11,000 meters. And that's really just to as a starting place. So we of course would love to see data submitted and collected at as high resolution as possible, but that's basically a starting place for a global product that would be distributed. And again, it addresses some of the questions that Michael also raised, that often data is collected at very high resolution and people are not comfortable sharing it, but at a little lower resolution where it will be a critical contribution to a global product, it's still very valuable.
Great. And then finally, a last question from Raja Shaya, whether there are plans to map the ocean floors related to areas where, of course, we see the emergence of cyclones, and tsunamis. Again, any views on that? I mean, we've highlighted the importance of coastal bathymetry, particularly in terms of coming up with tsunami forecasts and models and therefore impacts on the coast. But I don't know about other areas where cyclones emerge in the open ocean. If there's any.
Well, I'll just chime in and say that the plan is to try to map everywhere. So yeah. Ideally everything is covered, and I think we'll see that a lot of national efforts are focused on particularly critical coastal regions with respect to at least tsunamis.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. I think we almost at quarter past. I think we've overrun our time, and I'm sorry, as your moderator, should have been a little bit more, timely. But anyway, I want to thank all our 5 panelists for their great interventions. We really look forward to continue those discussions in the context of a UN decade. I think this is only the start, and we have a great forum now in front of us to really try to come up with a different level of collaborations and technical developments to advance this area in the context of a decade. So with this, thank you very much. Stay tuned. I'm sure there will be, and I hope there will be over important ideas and recommendations emerging in the course of a week, which can really also help us to move forward with some actions on ocean mapping in the decade. And stay tuned. There will be several events this year, and particularly the kickoff conference for the decade on the 1st of June, and other events at the UN Ocean Global Conference, probably in the second part of 2021, with again a strong focus on the decade and therefore ocean science and ocean mapping. So with this, thank you very much. This is the slide announcing on the screen the next event, which is the TISCOM subcommittee meeting. And you can see here the Zoom meeting ID in case you want to join. But I'm overstepping here, and I think, Tim, this is maybe you want to announce anything. But in any case, thank you from our perspective, and we wish you a great symposium. Thank you very much.
Great, and thank you, Julian, and all the panelists for this super interesting session. Very much enjoyed it, as I'm sure everybody did. The important link there is at the bottom of the screen, mapthegaps.org/symposium, where you can access the full agenda and all of the Zoom links for the coming meetings and sessions this week. We're over time, so I won't take any more time. I are looking into how quickly we can get the recordings of these sessions available And so stay tuned for information on that. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.